Welcome to the Boomer Briefing Podcast, where we help you solve a critical business issue in 20 minutes or less. My name is Jon Hubbard. I'm your host, and with me today is Arianna Campbell. Hi, Arianna.
Hey, Jon.
Thank you for being here. Arianna is a consultant here at Boomer Consulting, and among other things, she specializes in helping firms improve processes just throughout the firm. So that leads to our topic for today is how to improve any firm process. So Arianna, I will kick you off with a question. Why is it important that firms seek to improve processes just across the board?
Now, that is a great question, Jon. When you think about all of the opportunities within the firm to add more value to your clients and to really focus on the things that matter, one of the things that we consistently hear from firms is really having the capacity and the resources to be able to do that. So when we think about capacity, think about the resources and the time to be able to do that. And what we find is that that capacity can be found through process improvement, because oftentimes there are things that are happening within those processes that aren't adding value. There are steps that aren't adding value. There are loops, bottlenecks, 18 different ways of doing things, and none of those things add value, but they take up a lot of time. So if you can focus on process improvement and get rid of those things that aren't adding value, it gives you the capacity to focus on the things that matter, which is delivering more value to your clients.
So when you think about processes within a firm, you have the typical tax process, you have the typical audit process, and you have, of course, helped dozens and dozens of firms, improve those processes in a major way. Well, you also, in addition to that, work with firms on other processes. So what are some examples of other processes you've seen firms really focus on?
So process improvement can be applied to anything, but lots of times what firms go to immediately is the compliance processes, and thinking of it from more of an efficiency standpoint, which is important because we always want to look for ways to be more efficient. But when we think about what process improvement can do overall, it really speaks more to effectiveness, not only looking at efficiency, but also increasing the quality, increasing the experience for your staff, ultimately increasing the client experience. And when you think about those things, that doesn't just apply to your compliance processes. So think about your billing process. Think about your onboarding process for your clients, but also for new people who you're bringing in. Think about your process for help desk tickets. Think about, any of your operational processes within your firm, and process improvement applies to that as well. Because remember, what we're ultimately looking to do is stop doing the things that aren't really adding value so that we can free up that capacity to really focus, once again, on the things that matter.
I agree. So when you talk about process improvement, that can, often for firms feel like a really huge topic. And how do you approach it? How do you tackle that? Right now, if you're a normal firm out there listening, you might have 4 different processes for the same process, so to speak, depending on an individual, and the individuals involved, depending on the number of offices. So it can just feel like a really unwieldy topic. So Arianna, can you share with the audience, when you go in and help a firm, or if a firm is thinking about how they can tackle a process improvement project on their own, what framework would you recommend they use to start to get their arms around how to improve their processes?
So process, depending on what processes you're looking to tackle, it can seem really intimidating. And one thing that would definitely recommend to start off the framework is to make sure that you have a point person who's focused on process improvement. Just straight DIY with no point person and no strategy can really cause more harm than help, where you find yourself, coming up with ideas and brainstorming, but not really truly implementing lasting change. So having that point person who is responsible for process improvement and who is really taking the lead on the initiative, in addition to ideally having some training around process improvement. Lean Six Sigma is a great methodology or framework for process improvement, will really help to accelerate the progress and create lasting results. So once you have that point person in place, identified and in place, the next part that's really important is putting together a team that is a cross-functional team. You want to make sure that you avoid the misstep of only having it be top-down process improvement, where you maybe just have the partners and the managers involved in that initiative or that exercise, because it's really important to have the perspectives of not just the partners and managers, but of the supervisors, the staff, admin, and IT as well, because you need to understand the process from the different directions, and depending on what processes you're working on, those roles may differ a little bit, but it's important to have the right people sitting at the table before you can even get to the framework. That's part of the framework, is having the right people involved and having that cross-functional perspective. So once you have the point person and the people in place, that's when you can really dive into the work of process improvement. And it's not just as simple as getting into a room and, you know, coming up with ideas that are going to make the process better. It's really important to start off with that team getting on the same page of what it is they're actually trying to do. Jon, I don't know if you've ever, you know, focused on trying to improve a process, or even started talking about a topic, maybe it wasn't even process improvement, and you find out as you're further into the conversation that you're kind of talking about two different things, or sometimes, you know, if you have more people in the room, we might be talking about 5 different things, even though you thought you were talking about the same thing. Right. So that's why it's important to start off with getting everyone on the same page. From there, you want to get a good understanding of what's currently happening with your processes, what's actually happening. Because when we work with firms, what we find in the majority of the cases is that there are some things that they are really doing well in their processes. And you don't want to look at process improvement as a rip and replace. You really want to get a good understanding of what's currently happening so that you can preserve the things that are really going well and that can set the firm up for continued success, but to obviously minimize or eliminate the things that just aren't adding value. That starts with understanding your current process. From there, it's important to look at, based on that current process, you can really get a good understanding of where there are loops or variations or bottlenecks or just redundant steps. And then you want to get to your understanding of why that's happening, really getting to the root cause of why those things are happening. Because if you only solve surface issues, which is lots of times what happens in brainstorming, then you're going to have to keep solving those problems over and over again. That's why we want to make sure that we're getting to the root cause of why those things are happening. Then from there, coming up with preliminary improvement ideas, and then vetting those ideas to make sure that they really are sound. Maybe you're getting feedback from those who weren't on the team. Maybe you're testing tools or technology to have improvements there. Then you want to put together what the new process looks like, but most importantly, you want to put together a plan for training and implementation, because if you don't have that, that goes back to the part about having challenges with lasting results. Right. So simply getting on the same page, looking at the current process, understanding the root cause of the issues, based on that, coming up with some preliminary improvement ideas, vetting those, using those answers to build up and improve the process, and then putting together a plan for training and implementation.
No, that's great, Arianna. And I've had the privilege of being involved in projects with you. And one thing you do so well, and I think it's just crucial to a successful process improvement project in general, is being able to pull information out from a larger group of individuals from the project team and kind of bring that together. And you do that in a lot of different ways, but one thing that really stood out to me, or kind of one way you do this, is asking questions that sometimes at face value seem overly simplistic. So here's an example. Where does this process start? Where does this process begin? You think that's just going to be a real quick conversation about, oh, it starts here and it ends here and everyone's in agreement and the team singing Kumbaya, and then you move on to the next. But in reality, you start to see that, oh, we're all thinking a little bit differently just about what the, like, where the process starts and where, where it ends. And that in and of itself, getting clarity around that can be amazingly beneficial. And so I know you just gave a great summary and a high level overview on kind of the framework you take firms through. But I also know there's a lot more detail there that's left unsaid on exactly how you do that. So thanks for kind of sharing that, Arianna. So let's move on to the next question, which is, let's say someone is listening to this and they say, hey, that sounds really great. We have a process in mind, whether it's our invoicing and billing process, whether it's onboarding, client engagement, or even a compliance process. And they say, all right, I got a process in mind. It'd be great if we could go through this type of project. Kind of paint the picture for the listener on if they did go through something like this. What are some of the results that they would get out of it? What are some examples of the positive benefits they would get out of it?
Well, one of the most positive benefits is really a change in mindset. When we talk about process improvement, it's all about continuous improvement and not just having it be an event and something that happened, but it's something that you're continually looking at ways that you can be better. And it's funny, when we work with firms, there are always, specific objectives that we are working to achieve at the beginning. And one of the things that we consistently hear at the end of projects is that a benefit that they underestimated was that culture of continuous improvement and how it bleeds over into other areas of the firm. So, and that's important because when you think about all of the different areas of a process where there are opportunities, the more buy-in that you can get for that across the firm, the more you're going to see improvements happening and people taking ownership of that. So that'd be one of the top ones. But we also see things like decreased turnaround time, where you are actually moving things through the process faster. Increase in quality, and also a reduction in hours being spent doing the job, getting the partners and people at higher levels, really getting the ability to be able to focus on higher level activities and the things that they're doing, getting the right people doing the right work at the right time. It's also another one. Lots of times inefficiencies and ineffectiveness in your processes come from people in misalignment within their roles. They're not doing they're not working at their best and highest use, and process improvement helps with that as well. They're, seeing things like increases in realization depending on the project are also, hard metrics that firms are always interested in as well. But really, when you think about the benefits and the results, it starts with, during that define phase that we talked about, really having a conversation with the team around what are the success criteria? How will we determine if this project is actually successful? And having a conversation about that with the team. So that's another one where people will usually pause because they may not have, thought about that, especially as a group. So once you define those success criteria, that's when you assign metrics to go along with that, and you track those to make sure that your process is aligning with that and you're meeting those goals. So there may be some standard, benefits that you see across the board, but the other great thing about process improvement is that it's not prescriptive. There may be a framework, but you're really, customizing the improvements to help align with the goals of the firm. That's why we always highly encourage that firms have a strategic plan as they're looking at process improvement, because the strategic plan will help to direct what processes have the most opportunity and then use that process improvement to drive meeting those firm goals.
Yeah, so it helps you know where to start and how it aligns to the larger firm objectives. So it's not just process improvement for process improvement's sake. So that's great.
And I think that it really, so in the past, process improvement has really been looked at a lot, from the efficiency standpoint, but there definitely is a shift towards focusing instead of just on efficiency, which at the heart of it is, about velocity and how fast can we get things, done and out the door, to really effectiveness. How can we have this process be more effective? And in some cases, that might mean spending more time on a step than you used to in order to increase quality, while you may be eliminating 2 or 3 steps down the road. So really moving from that idea of efficiency to effectiveness, moving from a mindset of just optimization to truly evolving your processes, because as our business models are evolving, our processes need to evolve along with those. And optimizing our processes isn't enough. We need to make sure that we're evolving them to align with our changes in our business model and our changes in our technology. Another shift is from just thinking about workflow management to actual business process management, and effectively using your workflow to get data and insights from that workflow technology to truly use that as a business management tool, where you're taking what you're learning from how the work is running through your process and using that to manage accordingly, your resources, your people, time, everything else, really basing that off of your workflow and then the data and the insights from that. And that's a game changer and really makes process all the more important, and it's necessary for firms to have that continued success. We can't look at process like we used to.
So you spend a lot of time in accounting firms and have made a lot of accounting firms a lot more profitable and gain a lot more capacity to spend their time and energy on more valuable things. How do you see just the topic and your expertise around process improvement? How do you see it affecting professions outside of the accounting profession?
So I think that process improvement impacts every profession. In fact, it has professional impacts as well as personal impacts. But there are parallels across the board, no matter the industry. And I think in some cases within the accounting profession, they're just really starting to discover and uncover where there can really be benefits. So I think the advantage of that is that the accounting profession can learn from other industries who are maybe further down the path of process improvement, while still maintaining the things that are unique to the accounting profession. We are not producing widgets. It's a professional services, industry. And so we need to be taking things like professional judgment into account. But process and the need for process improvement happens across the board. And the best thing about that is that as firms are using process improvement internally, they're learning the skills to be able to help their clients. And so in our certified consultant training program, we focus on helping accounting professionals become more consultative. And it's so that they can offer different services to their clients that they need. And process improvement is one of those. Their clients' businesses are running into the same challenges that they are within their firms. And as they refine these skills, they can turn that into a service offering to help their clients improve.
That's great. So, all right, we are rounding out our time here. But for those watching or listening, what is one next step you would recommend for them? Let's say someone watched or listened and they're intrigued by what you're saying. Maybe they're thinking about their organization and some of the opportunities that are there for them to improve some processes. Do you have a recommended next step for the listeners?
Recommended next step would be to determine what processes would benefit most from a process improvement initiative. and really give some thoughtful consideration to that, aligning it with the strategic plan. If you don't have a strategic plan, that's definitely the first place to start, and an area where we really love helping firms, as well as in the process improvement aspect. But identifying where the greatest opportunity is and making sure that it's in alignment with the firm's direction and goals is the first place to start. And then the second step would be to really be thinking about who is in charge of process improvement within your firm. Because if no one is, then that's definitely an opportunity to find that person and really give them the ownership and opportunity to lead that direction.
That is great, Arianna. Well, Arianna, as always, it's a pleasure taking some time to speak with you about this topic. So thank you for making yourself available to chat about this. So I'm sure to appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And for those listeners, stay tuned for the next episode of the Boomer Briefing. We release them each week. So stay tuned for the next episode. Thanks so much. Bye.